Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the anatomy of a modern narco empire. We're going to break down exactly how the world's most dangerous cartel built a completely staggering global operation and how one single dramatic military raid brought its elusive leader crashing down. $5 million. That's the massive bounty the United States slapped on the head of just one man, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, or as he's much better known, El Mencho. But you know what's really wild about this? Until his literal final day, this immensely powerful fugitive was hiding right in plain sight. He was living totally off the grid in a picturesque mountain tourist town in Mexico called Tapalpa. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's the roadmap for our journey today. We'll start with the fall of El Mencho, then trace his path from cop to kingpin. After that, we'll look at the synthetic drug empire, the plaza system, America's policy boomerangs, and finally, a war without borders. Let's get into it. Section 1. The Fall of El Mencho, February 2026. So the raid itself was incredibly swift and highly coordinated. For years, El Mencho was basically a ghost. But then, on February 20th, Mexican intelligence caught a massive break. They tracked an associate straight to a secluded cabin in Tapalpa. The very next day, his partner leaves, and suddenly, El Mencho is isolated with just his bodyguards. This was the exact window authorities have been waiting for. Right before sunrise on the 22nd, special forces silently surround the compound. A fierce firefight breaks out, the elusive kingpin is captured, and he ultimately dies while being airlifted to Mexico City. Moving on to Section 2, From Cop to Kingpin, Exploring the Rise of CJNG. Now, to understand the empire, we really have to zoom in on the architect. How does a kid who dropped out of the 5th grade to guard marijuana fields build all of this? Well, his origin story brilliantly illustrates the irony of it all. Back in 1992, El Mencho gets caught in a San Francisco bar dealing heroin. He does his time in prison, gets deported to Mexico at age 30, and then gets hired immediately as a local police officer. Wearing that badge literally taught him the inner workings of the law. He learned exactly who could be bought, for exactly how much, and where the system had cracks. That inside knowledge became an absolute game changer when he split from his bosses in 2010 to form the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG. Fast forward to 2015, and El Mencho's cartel is no longer just a street gang, it's a full-blown paramilitary force. In May of that year, the Mexican military sends helicopters to capture him during Operation Jalisco. But CJNG was ready. They were waiting with heavy machine guns and RPGs, and they literally blew a military helicopter right out of the sky. It was a terrifying display of military-grade firepower that left only 9 of the 18 soldiers on board alive. Which brings us to Section 3, the synthetic drug empire, focusing on fentanyl and meth. So how exactly do you fund a private army capable of shooting down military aircraft? The answer is synthetics, specifically fentanyl and methamphetamine. Just wrap your head around this number, 2 milligrams. That is roughly equivalent to a few grains of sand sitting right on the palm of your hand, and it's a completely lethal dose of fentanyl for a human being. It's incredibly deadly, yet it became the absolute foundation of CJNG's modern economic empire. Now, what's really interesting about this is the sheer scale of the economics. Unlike cocaine, which relies entirely on crops grown in places like Colombia, synthetics can be cooked up anywhere. By taking over the port of Manzanillo, CJNG started importing massive amounts of raw chemicals directly from China. And the margins are just mind-blowing. An upfront investment of a mere $500 in production translates to an estimated $20 million in cartel profit. A single pill that costs them 10 cents to make ends up selling on U.S. streets for anywhere from 10 to 30 bucks. It is an economic engine of an almost unimaginable scale. All right, Section 4, the plaza system and systemic corruption. To really grasp how they operated, we need to talk about the foundational rule of this world, plata o plomo. Translated, that means silver or lead. Imagine you're a local mayor. Maybe you make around 30,000 pesos a month. One night, an SUV pulls up. Cartel enforcers offer you a briefcase crammed with 500,000 pesos in one hand and a gun in the other. Silver or lead? Take the bribe or take a bullet. This isn't some Hollywood movie plot. The sources show this happened constantly, systematically, forcing local governments to just hand over control. But zooming out, this goes so much deeper into the political structure. For 71 years, Mexico's PRI party essentially utilized this plaza system, taking organized crime bribes as a trade-off for public peace. When that arrangement fell apart, President Felipe Calderón launched a militarized war on drugs in 2006. But rather than fixing things, that just violently splintered the cartels into even deadlier factions. Then, by 2018, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador tried a totally different hugs not bullets approach, focusing on poverty. But that also failed to curb the violence. And now, in 2026, President Claudia Sheinbaum is facing immense mounting pressure to act in the wake of El Mencho's death. Let's cross the border for Section 5, America's Policy Boomerangs, looking at U.S. missteps. Now, you might be wondering, how did America actually fuel its own crisis here? It's a critical question. Because when you look at the history, a really fascinating chain of U.S. policy decisions inadvertently architected some key pieces of this whole disaster. Let's break it down based on the facts. Back in the 1980s, a U.S. Senate investigation revealed that the CIA actually trained Contra rebels right on a known Mexican drug lord's ranch. Then, NAFTA gets signed in 1994. U.S. subsidized corn flooded into Mexico, which displaced nearly 2 million Mexican farmers. That created this massive, ready-made recruitment pool for the cartels. At the same time, commercial border trade exploded to 12,000 trucks a day, making it practically impossible to search everything for drugs. Oh, and add Operation Fast and Furious to the mix, where U.S. agencies intentionally let over 2,000 weapons cross the border, only to lose track of them completely to the cartels. So the crucial point here is the weapons. The Mexican government estimates a staggering 200,000 firearms are smuggled south from the U.S. every single year. Between 2014 and 2018, 70%, let that sink in, 70% of all firearms recovered in Mexico were sourced directly out of the United States. Which takes us to Section 6, a war without borders, and the explosive aftermath. The immediate fallout from El Mencho's death was just pure chaos. CJNG placed a literal $100 bounty on the head of any Mexican soldier. We saw narco-terrorism erupt, with over 250 roadblocks and fires spread across 20 states. Major cities like Guadalajara practically shut down, resembling ghost towns. In response, the U.S. took unprecedented action, invoking Operation Southern Spear. This involved the American military bombing alleged drug vessels in international waters without a trial, a move human rights groups fiercely criticized as illegal. Meanwhile, the Trump administration pushed hard to officially classify these cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. Let's move on and see how this all builds into a deeply shared global crisis. Because history shows us time and time again that taking out one kingpin just paves the way for two more to rise up. Nothing really changes until the root causes are addressed. Step 1 is that insatiable U.S. demand for drugs fueling the market. Step 2, Chinese raw materials supplying the covert labs. Step 3, that iron river of U.S. weapons flowing south, arming the cartels. And Step 4, the systemic corruption in Mexico protecting the entire enterprise. Until that cycle breaks, the empire doesn't end. It just changes management. Which leaves us with a truly provocative reality. In June 2026, just months after these explosive events, the FIFA World Cup is set to bring global audiences right into Guadalajara, the absolute heart of CJNG territory. So can this cycle of violence actually be broken before the world arrives? Or is the stage set for an even bigger confrontation? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the systems around you, and we'll catch you next time.